It was a bitter Tuesday night, March 1st, 1932. The wind cut through the bare trees of Hopewell, New Jersey, rattling the windows of a sprawling country estate known as Highfields. Inside, the most famous family in America believed their child was safe, asleep in his crib. But by morning, the world would know his name for all the wrong reasons. The Lindbergh baby was gone, and what followed would be called by newspapers and prosecutors alike the crime of the century. To understand the weight of what happened that night, you have to understand who Charles Lindbergh was. Just 5 years earlier, in 1927, he had done the impossible, flying solo, non-stop, from New York to Paris in the spirit of St. Louis. Overnight, he became a global hero. His face was on magazine covers, his name in every headline. He was young, handsome, and fearless, the embodiment of American ambition. 2 years later, he married Anne Morrow, the daughter of a wealthy diplomat. She was intelligent, reserved, and shared his love of adventure. Together, they sought refuge from the relentless press, building Highfields on 390 acres of secluded woodland. It was meant to be a sanctuary for their young son, Charles Augustus Lindbergh Jr., born in June 1930. But fame has a way of erasing privacy. Even in rural New Jersey, strangers would drive by, hoping for a glimpse of the Lindberghs. And in early 1932, that isolation would be shattered forever. On that fateful night, around 8 p.m., Anne tucked 20-month-old Charles Jr. into his crib in the upstairs nursery. The weather was cold, the wind sharp. The child had been recovering from a mild cold, so the family decided to stay in Hopewell instead of returning to their home in Englewood. Downstairs, Charles Sr. sat in the library, reading. The household staff went about their evening routines. At about 10 p.m., Betty Gow, the baby's nurse, went to check on him. The crib was empty. Panic set in instantly. She alerted Anne, who called for her husband. Charles rushed upstairs, searching the room. On the windowsill, an envelope. Inside, a ransom note, crudely written in broken English, demanding $50,000 for the child's safe return. Outside, investigators would soon find muddy footprints beneath the window and a homemade wooden ladder. Broken in two, lying nearby. There were no fingerprints, no witnesses, just the cold night air and the sound of the wind through the trees. The Hopewell police were called immediately. Within hours, the New Jersey State Police took over, led by Colonel H. Norman Schwarzkopf. The case exploded into the headlines. America's hero had been struck by an unthinkable crime. Over the next days, more ransom notes arrived, each more urgent than the last. The kidnappers now demanded $70,000. They insisted on using an intermediary. That man was Dr. John F. Condon, a retired Bronx school principal known as Jaffe. He placed ads in the Bronx Home News, offering to act as a go-between. The kidnappers agreed. In a series of tense exchanges, Condon met a shadowy figure in a Bronx cemetery. The man called himself John. He claimed the child was safe and would be returned once the ransom was paid. On April 2, 1932, the ransom was delivered. $50,000 in gold certificates, their serial numbers carefully recorded. But the baby never came home. 6 weeks later, on May 12th, a truck driver discovered a small body in the woods, just miles from the Lindbergh estate. It was Charles Jr. The cause of death? Massive head trauma. The nation mourned. The investigation shifted from rescue to murder. For more than 2 years, the trail seemed cold. Then, in September 1934, a marked gold certificate from the ransom surfaced at a Manhattan gas station. The man who had paid with it was traced to a German immigrant carpenter named Bruno Richard Hauptmann. When police searched Hauptmann's home, they found $14,000 of the ransom money hidden in his garage. Wood from the homemade ladder matched lumber from his attic. Handwriting experts claimed his penmanship matched the ransom notes. Hauptmann insisted he was innocent, saying the money had been left with him by a friend who had since died. The trial began January 2nd, 1935, in Flemington, New Jersey. It was a media circus, reporters from around the world, radio broadcasts, and a public hungry for justice. Inside the courtroom, the prosecution painted Hauptmann as a cold-blooded kidnapper and killer. The defense argued the evidence was circumstantial, the investigation flawed. After 5 weeks of testimony, the jury found Hauptmann guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to death. Despite appeals and pleas from his wife, Hauptmann maintained his innocence until the end. On April 3, 1936, he was executed in the electric chair. The Lindbergh case changed America. In 1932, Congress passed the Federal Kidnapping Act, the Little Lindbergh Law, making it a federal crime to transport kidnapping victims across state lines. But the case also left behind a cloud of doubt. Some believed Hauptmann was guilty beyond question. Others argued the real kidnappers were never caught. For the Lindberghs, the loss was immeasurable. They left Highfields, seeking privacy overseas. Anne would later write about their grief, while Charles retreated from public life. Nearly a century later, the questions still linger. Was justice truly served? Or did the real story vanish into the night, just like the child whose life was stolen? Some crimes fade with time. This one never will.